to better heal the body.
The spirit to heal the body. I spent my last dollar getting here. One way ticket, and you're talking to me about healing through belief.
You reject the possibility.
No, I reject it because I do not believe in fairy tales about chakras or energy. There is no such thing as spirit.
Think too little of yourself.
Oh, you think you see through me, do you? Well, you don't. But I see through you.
It's a really cool research article by Lace. The unique aspect of this research article, even though there's been research articles looking at personality dimensions and religiosity and spirituality, is that this one parceled out individuals who are religious and spiritual, spiritual and religious, religious but not spiritual, and neither religious nor spiritual, right? So that's really important because most research articles just lump religiosity and spirituality together, and they don't look at these four different quadrants. So before
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la.
So before I begin, I always do this in my videos, but just to differentiate between religiosity and spirituality. So the two are convergent but interdependent constructs. So religion encompasses an organized institution. It usually has a codified text, right? It usually has set rituals, usually has a leader or a number of leaders. And spirituality can be one compass, one facet of a person's religiosity, right? But there's so many external factors. Spirituality can exist outside of religion, also within religion. So spirituality is more of the individual experiential dimension of the transcendent, right? So how we relate to God or the higher power, or however we think of a transcendent dimension. Those load on to compassion, altruism, definitely selflessness.
Is there anybody here?
No phone, no pool, no pets, no cigarettes. Ultimate freedom. An extremist. An aesthetic voyager whose home is the road.
Right. They've done personality research on political leanings also, right? So, we look at people who are conservative and we're like, how can they think like that? We look at people who are extremely leftist and we're like, how can they be like that? Well, there are many different variables as to why people choose to be one political orientation over another, but one of them is personality, right? And lots of personality is genetic. And here's a statistic by Lace where a large degree of personality is genetic, right? And you guys may be familiar with Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's a personality psychologist, so a lot of what he talks about is based in personality psychology, right? So people who are higher in conscientiousness, they're organized, right? They like hierarchies, they like order, they probably most likely support the police, right? These calls to ban the police for them are like chaos for them, right? Because they like order, they like community, right? They like having a structure in place, whereas people who are higher on openness, lower on conscientiousness, right? They're more lateral thinkers, right? They're more horizontal thinkers, right? Let's break down the system. We need to challenge the status quo. So now I want to go into the 5-factor model, right? So I explain all 5-factor models and how they correlate with religiosity and spirituality. That's a very important gender difference, which they found in lots of research. So women tend to be higher on religiousness, which is really interesting. They also tend to be higher on spirituality. And, I found mixed research just because of how religiosity is measured. Most forms of religiosity are measured as rate of attendance at a place of worship, right? So they found that Muslim men are higher in religiousness than women are, but actually that may not be the case because men in Muslim countries are required to go to places of worship for Jummah prayers, Friday prayers, whereas women are not. So again, lots of these so-called, reports that we have, the methodology that they used isn't sufficient enough. So what this research article found was that extroversion, conscientiousness, and agreeableness positively correlated with religiosity and spirituality, but neuroticism negatively correlated with it, which just means that if you're a person higher on neuroticism, right, again, that's the tendency to experience negative emotionality, you're less inclined to be religious or spiritual, right? But interestingly, openness, right, which is the ability to capture, integrate novel ideas, loaded positively with spirituality, but not with religiosity. And you can kind of understand why, right? Religiosity is concerned with a hierarchical structure, order, objective morality, which is why conscientiousness is positively correlated with religiosity. But openness, which is more of that, question things, question the status quo, loads on to spirituality, which I talked about, that experiential, individual facet.
You gotta get back out in the world. Get out of that lonely house, that little workshop of yours. Get back out on the road. You should make a radical change in your lifestyle. I mean, the core of man's spirit comes from new experiences.
But you're wrong if you think that the joy of life comes principally from human relationships. God's placed it all around us. It's in everything, in anything we can experience. People just need to change the way they look at those things.
Yeah, I'm going to take stock of that. But there's some kind of bigger thing we can all appreciate. And it sounds like you don't mind calling it God. But when you forgive, you love. And when you love, God's light shines on you.
Facet. So extroversion, you can kind of understand why it relates to religiosity and spirituality, right? People who are higher in extroversion are more likely to seek out social supports of pattern, whereas people who are more introverted will rely on themselves, usually don't venture out much. So for them, going out 2-3 times a week to participate in communal church activities, that really doesn't suffice for them. For them having a one-on-one conversation, a dinner with a friend is good enough for them. Whereas people who are higher in extroversion, right, they need that social support, right? They need to be surrounded by people, share similar ideas with people, have that communal support, which is really important for them. And then finally, we have agreeableness, right? So the tendency to show warmth, compassion, support for people, right? People who are higher in agreeableness also have higher in altruistic acts, such as volunteering efforts, which makes sense because religious institutions, for all of the harm they do, and people may be saying, I hate organized religion, that's okay. They do lots of volunteering efforts, right? So people who are more agreeable are more inclined to lead an effort of charity, helping children, helping the impoverished. And also people who are spiritual, who are higher in agreeableness also, right? Because you're not only being confronted with new ideas, but spirituality is that experiential component. So you're integrating a person's philosophy into your life, right? So it's not just an intellectual thing. Oh, that's interesting. Buddhism talks about that. Okay, I don't care anymore. No, okay, that's interesting. Non-attachment, non-self. Wow, how can I go about my day being more selfless, right? And that leads to a higher degree of agreeableness. Agreeableness and compassion are linked with each other. And then finally, one of the things that I really want to point out before we move on is that higher levels of neuroticism mean that a person doesn't have a religious or spiritual coping mechanism. And that's really important because that predicts higher distress tolerance, lower self-regulation, lower adaptive self-monitoring mechanisms, right? Which is why, adapting a spiritual component is integral to a person's psychological health. I mean, that needs to be said. There is enough research to establish this as a fact, right? Whether you believe in transcendent, abstract components of a person's life, it doesn't matter, right? Science can't answer these questions of morality, of the why. Why are we here? Why are we humans? Why should I wake up and even motivate myself? Science is concerned with the how. So a person needs to adopt some sort of transcendent, overarching mechanism by which to make sense of this crazy world. Which is why when I work with children and I work with adolescents, I always ask them about their spiritual lives, right? Whether that's through mindfulness, whether that's through their church, whether that's through their art. Hey guys, so that concludes the first part of the video. The next part of the video, which I'll release next week or the week after that, I'll actually go into taking a personality inventory on my own, and I'll speak to you guys about the results and what that means psychologically, also career-wise, also for behavioral functions, and also talk about the subdimensions of each of the 5 personality constructs, which I didn't get into. So look forward to that video. Thank you for watching. Support, subscribe to the channel. There are lots of links that I leave in the description for you guys to broaden your knowledge and understanding, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you.